When Tutankhamun's tomb was first opened in the early 1900s, a wave of Tut mania would spread across the globe, alongside rumors of a curse. But was this curse real? Question mark.
I'm excited to find out.
Welcome back, everyone, to Odd Anthropology. My name is Ivy Boyd.
And I am Tasha Coster.
And before we get into this very fun episode, if anyone tuning in is thinking, ugh, everyone knows about King Tut. We learned about him in elementary school. He's part of the curriculum in the US. I'm pretty sure everyone I know learned about him at some point. I want to add that at my ripe age of 31 years old, even I learned a whole bunch of new stuff researching this. So maybe some people listening might learn a new thing or two as well. And for anyone who doesn't know who Tutankhamun was, Tutankhamun, or King Tut, was a pharaoh who reigned during the 14th century BCE. He was quite young, only about 9 or 10 years old. Oh, okay, hold on. Before I get more into this, we are facing the negative effects of the curse already. Before we started recording, Tasha's mic kept like switching in and out between the good mic and the not good mic. So if that happens, disregard. It's the curse, but we're going to work through it all together, okay?
Yes. Thankfully, I'm just here to chime in, so hopefully it won't matter too much.
If Tasha sounds like she is communicating to us from a landline directly out of the 1970s, you will know why. So, King Tut. Speaking of old things, actually, he was very young when he died. Okay, actually, hold on, we're getting too ahead of myself. So, King Tut, he was quite young, only about 9 or 10 years old when he inherited his position of power after the passing of his father, Akhenaten. And although he was so young, and he wasn't pharaoh for that long before the boy king himself also died, spoiler alert, at age 18 or 19, he was beloved by many because his father, Akhenaten, had made some changes to religion in Egypt, which a lot of people didn't like. They had been polytheistic, so they worshipped multiple gods, goddesses, but Akhenaten ordered that imagery of other gods be defaced and destroyed except for the sun god, Aten, who he wanted to be the only god worshipped, making Egypt monotheistic, and a lot of people didn't like that. After Akhenaten's passing and Tutankhamun took over, he restored the polytheistic religion. He even took it a step further and condemned his father's actions and said that it was because of him that these other gods turned their backs on Egypt and thus caused any hardships during his reign. But the boy king reassured his people that he was going to fix this, or he would at least try, but he wasn't in good health. And we know this because his mummy remains, and we have been carefully studying it through bioarchaeological analysis.
Yeah.
Oh, it did like the mic switch thing again. Do we want to try to fix it or just accept it?
The curse. We thought we weren't going to get hit, but nope, here we go.
Tasha's actually like underground in Egypt, deep in a tomb, and that's why the connection isn't very good right now.
Reporting live from King Tut's tomb.
Yes. Where the heck was I in my notes? King Tut he had a lot of big plans, but he was not someone in good health. And we know this because his mummy remains and has been very carefully studied through bioarchaeological analysis. So we know that he shows signs of having been suffering from things like malaria, which is a disease spread by infected mosquitoes, He also had Kohler disease, which is a bone disorder that affected one of his feet, so he likely had a limp. Tutankhamun also had a condition called gynecomastia, which is the enlargement of male breast tissue due to hormonal imbalances. And he had a elongated skull, he had prominent front teeth, and all of this meant that he was not only visually different, but he was kind of a skinny and frail individual as well. And it's speculated that his mental capacity may have also been stunted. And it's possible that a lot of this was the result of something that we see in like every single royal powerful family throughout all of time, familial inbreeding. Woohoo! Because his parents are believed by many to have been siblings. So, but this is still debated. But it would explain all of these genetic issues because that's what happens with generations of inbreeding. So, at just 18 or 19 years old, Tutankhamun passes away, and we believe it was unexpected. And he may have died from the malaria, but there's also evidence that he began suffering from necrosis in his problem foot. He also suffered a different leg injury prior to his death, which may have caused infection, which could have also contributed to his early death. We aren't really sure. He had a lot going on, but we can speculate that it was an unexpected death because there were plans for his grand tomb, which, pharaohs receive. They all get a nice fancy tomb. But Tutankhamun ended up being placed in a much smaller tomb, which may have been intended to be used for someone else, but because his wasn't complete, they had to make do with a tomb that was available at the time. More evidence for this and for the acquisition of a ready-made tomb and rushing all of this is that there were these strange spots in the paint on the walls in his tomb. And a lot of the items inside also had a lot more deterioration than what we usually find in these tombs, which can be really good at preserving things, which points to his tomb at one point in time having had a bad mold problem. And this could be caused by general leaking of groundwater into the tombs. This isn't anything new, but because of these weird spots in the paint especially, it is speculated that his tomb was sealed shut while the paint in the plaster itself, which was used to decorate the walls, was still wet. It hadn't even had time to dry yet when they put everything in there and sealed it. His famous gold mask on his sarcophagus that I'm sure everybody has seen is also evidence of this being an untimely death, as it kind of looks like it was made for someone else. It didn't have quite the level of craftsmanship. Something seems off about it. And so people speculate that it was altered to be used for him as well. Again, just from dying so suddenly and not having time to make him one of his own. And a lot of the items in his tomb were also just kind of stacked around and piled in a somewhat unusual manner for a pharaoh. So all of this points to things being done very quickly. But this has also been interpreted as a sign that he was unliked, which was partly true. Of course, not everyone loved him. Not everyone loves every single pharaoh. They're always going to have people who don't support them. During his reign, Egypt was experiencing a lot of violence. Those who strongly supported his father and a monotheistic religion certainly didn't like King Tut because he went against everything his father had put in place. But because he was so young, and again, we have to keep in mind that he was potentially mentally underdeveloped as well, he might have made some not great rulings or decisions or things that didn't make sense to people. But it's also very likely that the adults around him, as we so often see with boy kings throughout history, that the adults were the ones influencing him and pulling the strings in the decision making. So his tomb could have been put together poorly because it was rushed. It could have been put together poorly because of dislike. It could have been a bit of both. And maybe poorly isn't the best word because, it was still beautiful and elaborate, and the items inside. I mean, there's a reason that everyone knows of King Tut's tomb, but it just wasn't quite what you usually see with a pharaoh. And so although I'm not a Egyptologist by any means, what I can confidently speak on is the very famous alleged curse which was unleashed upon the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb. Everybody gets scared. My credentials, you may ask? Well, I have spent years researching, investigating the paranormal, debunking a lot of these famous stories and claims, and curses fall right up this alley. So these are the types of things that I guess more as a hobbyist really like to look into. But now I can say, hey, I'm a student too, so let's throw that into the mix. But to get to the bottom of this curse, we first need to look at the events leading up to the actual opening of the tomb. The early 19th century, or 1800s, saw a huge boom in interest for ancient Egypt. Every wealthy European and their mother wanted in on these tombs that were being discovered, especially those belonging to pharaohs and people of higher statuses and nobility, mostly in an area known as the Valley of the Kings. Of course, there are issues here in how they carried out excavations, and we could talk about ethics and straight up grave robbery and the desecration of the dead. And something else to keep in mind is the guilt that people would eventually feel because of this. So keep that in mind as I go through this story. But when King Tutankhamun's tomb in particular was rediscovered in 1922 by a team of Egyptian archaeologists being led by the British Egyptologist Howard Carter, which was funded by a man named George Herbert. And this was a monumental find. It began with them uncovering a single step on November 4th of that year, 1922, knowing they found a tomb entrance, and about 20 days later they reached the tomb of Tutankhamun. And miraculously, it had never been seriously targeted by looters, but there was evidence that sometime probably not long after it was sealed, that it was broken into and looted a little bit, but not much. And I say that because you'll see people claim that when they found it, it had never been opened before, but this isn't entirely true. Moving on. Carter would write of this discovery in his diary, quote, "As one's eyes became accustomed to the glimmer of light in the interior of the chamber, gradually loomed before one with its strange and wonderful medley of extraordinary and beautiful objects heaped upon one another. And these grand burial goods, which was about 5,398 objects total, included over 400 figurines known as shabtis, which would serve the king in the afterlife. There was also more than 200 pieces of jewelry and several dismantled chariots. And there were also more mundane everyday items as well, like baskets of fruit, boxes of meat, cosmetics like coal, which was used for their distinct eyeliner. There was a lot of clothing, including tunics, shirts, shandits, which were a kilt-like skirt, and also gloves, sandals, even a few of Tutankhamun's canes, which further points to the issues he probably had with his foot and mobility. And on this very humanizing note and content warning for sad, he was also buried with toys, a box of paints, and a fire lighting kit. These are all very childish objects and were things that he may have cherished at his young age when he was first made king, in which he maybe was still cherishing even into his teenage years at the time of his death. Or maybe someone close to him cherished them enough to keep them and bury them with him. Either way, there does appear to be a sentimental nature to it at the very least, but this also just shows you how young he was. And the first time I read that and I was typing up these notes, I was tearing up over the toys. Oh my, and paints. I can't. It's so sad because I
Yeah.
have nephews that are around Tutankhamun's age of death. And so, yeah, reading about these
Right.
objects tied to Egyptian childhood really tugged at my heartstrings. It's easy to forget that these legendary figures are still just people. So, yeah, this was a very humanizing thing to read. So, now that we understand a little bit about who Tutankhamun was and his tomb's rediscovery, let's talk about the curse, finally. The story goes that George Herbert, who funded the dig, fell ill not too long after its discovery and died. And it must have been because a curse was placed upon the tomb to kill anyone who dared to interfere with it or steal from his tomb. But something to know about Herbert is that he was not in good health for a long while before this dig ever took place. There's a reason he funded it, but he wasn't physically there helping. His health decline began decades prior in 1903 when he was in a serious motoring accident, and he suffered from lung infections periodically ever since. Doctors advised that he avoid cold weather during the winter months to help with his lungs, so he chose to spend his winters in Egypt, which is where his interest in Egyptology began. But like many others in this region, he would catch malaria from a mosquito bite. And because King Tutankhamun died of malaria, or it may have contributed to his death, people were quick to point this out and wondered if there was supernatural revenge of some kind. But Herbert didn't die of the malaria per se. What happened was, I'm assuming it was on his face or his neck, because he nicked the mosquito bite with a razor while shaving, which led to a bad skin infection, which led to a bad blood infection, which caused his death. So, a very, very unfortunate series of events. It's still eerie, maybe a bit coincidental, but let's not forget that malaria was and still is prevalent in this region. I know some other people actually involved in the excavation would also claim to face misfortune or suffered illness or eventual death, but this is also early 20th century archaeology where it was incredibly unsafe. No respirators, no protection from breathing in dirt and musty old air and molds. So I'm not surprised in the slightest that others involved in this field during this time had something happen to them. That was just the nature of the game. Or maybe some of it was due to spiritual protections and revenge of some kind. I do like to still lean that way just a little bit because why not? Worth noting also, though, is that the Egyptians didn't really place deadly curses on tombs. That wasn't really a thing. There were some curses placed on tombs, but they were more like, it wasn't enter or steal from me and you'll die. It was instead, from the very few examples that we have of tomb curses, because again, they weren't that common, they had more to do with a religious purity. That might not be the right way to put it, but basically these curses were like, to put it into modern terms, hey, future rulers, don't do any of your wicked religious nonsense in my tomb. Keep your future gods out of here. Like it was that flavor of warning for most of these curses. There was also the example of another tomb with a curse against the impure who entered their tomb. So, no no one impure, no sinners can come in, please. But even this curse warned more of judgment and casting fear onto the impure who dared to step foot inside. It wasn't, you're gonna die. There was also a tomb I read about that was basically like, anyone who breaks the seal of this tomb will die of a disease no doctor can diagnose. So there was an example of a death curse And I can see how you could kind of relate this to Herbert and his cause of death, albeit very loosely, but you could connect those dots. But this kind of curse also, again, was rare and not present in Tutankhamun's tomb. His tomb didn't have a curse of this capacity or any curse at all. And all of this to say that, I lost my place. Usually I make my font bigger so my old lady eyes can see it, and I did not do that this time. All of this to say that tomb curses were fair and few. They usually didn't call for the death of trespassers or looters, and the examples we have, they weren't from Tutankhamun's time anyways. Most of these tomb curses were well before his time. They kind of fell out of fashion. So if ancient Egyptians didn't even place this kind of Hollywood-esque curse like what we see with King Tut's tomb and all of the, books and papers and pop culture, where did this idea of his tomb being cursed come from? And we have something very unexciting to blame. We have selling exclusive newspaper rights to blame, which is not nearly as exciting as an actual curse. So basically, Tasha, have you heard of this at all? I'm curious.
I think that I kind of have a vague ping in my head when you said the newspapers. I was like, yeah, I think that's what I remember.
Okay, because this was entirely news to me when I was researching this. I was like, okay, they didn't tell me this in school. So basically, our boy Herbert, who funded the dig, he sold the exclusive rights to the story of the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb to the publisher The Times. And this rather selfish move aggravated a lot of people that were involved, including the Egyptian archaeologists and Egypt as a whole, who legally couldn't publish about this incredible discovery, which is madness, that they couldn't report on their own historical find in their country, made mostly by their people. And it was this very exclusivity to the story of the tomb's discovery that led to newspapers and tabloids coming up with creative alternate stories involving Tutankhamun's tomb that they could legally print. Because as I mentioned earlier, there was a booming interest in ancient Egypt. People wanted to read all about the discovery of tombs like this tomb, which led to not only the nickname King Tut, which is what most people know Tutankhamun by, but this is also where we get the term Tutmania. Everyone wanted to talk about this, and everyone wanted to read about it. So as newspapers around the globe wanted in on the Tutmania, and after the passing of Herbert, the idea of some kind of curse killing him spread like wildfire. There were false reports of some kind of warning of a curse inscribed on the walls within his tomb, which again isn't true. There's no inscriptions of a curse. There's no painting depicting a scary curse. There's no curse tablets. There's nothing. But you know what we do have? We do have guilt, just like I also mentioned previously. If we look at white guilt, for example, white guilt is responsible for creating the trope of the cursed Native American burial ground, which a lot of Americans are familiar with and have heard of. And this same guilt-based fear for the Native American burial ground, it's more so knowing that we took this land and the genocides that happened and the desecration of sacred grounds and burial grounds, and a lot of people feel guilty and a little bit scared by that guilt. And you see this with these ancient Egyptian discoveries. I personally haven't entered a newly opened ancient Egyptian tomb, but I can imagine how invasive it felt for people back then, and kind of eerie, especially because we didn't begin translating ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics until the early 19th century. So by the time this was happening, this was still a language that we were learning about. But prior to that, people went into these tombs and they just kind of made assumptions based on the imagery they saw. And you can see how imaginations over time ran wild before we fully understood what these hieroglyphics meant. And on this note, there are accounts from going as far back as the 1600s. For example, there was a Polish traveler, because we've been robbing from these Egyptian tombs for a very long time. There was a Polish traveler who got his hands on a couple of Egyptian mummies, which he loaded onto a ship, and then he allegedly saw visions of specters and encountered unusually stormy seas, which led him to believe that the mummies were seeking spiritual vengeance. And Tasha, what would you do in that scenario? You would maybe put them back, right? Take them back to where they came from?
I mean, that would definitely be the first thing that I would think of, yes.
Well, he tossed them overboard, was his solution.
Of course.
I feel like that would just make them angrier, but,
Yes.
Oh, well. And this is just one of many similar examples. There were early works of Gothic fiction, which dealt with mummies coming back to life and whatnot. So fear stemming from this guilt people started to feel from invading these burial spaces and stealing not just objects, but stealing the dead themselves certainly had a psychological effect. And of course would have influenced these headlines. Like, well, we can't report on the actual finding of Tutankhamun. Hey, let's say it's cursed. That's going to grab people. That's a catchy headline. People are going to want to read about it. And then some people probably legitimately, thought that was a possibility as well when Herbert passed. But, oh my gosh, something related to this that we'll have to cover eventually a little more in depth is mummy unwrapping parties.
Yeah.
People eating mummies. People turned mummies into paint. So there's some teasers for future episodes, I guess. Let us know if you want us to have episodes dedicated to that. That's not very fun, but people, we weren't just robbing, we were desecrating and destroying these things. And yeah, a lot of people started to kind of worry, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Crazy thought. Maybe that was bad. My conclusion here is that the real evil wasn't a curse. It was greed. It was Herbert being dumb and selling exclusivity rights to this story, which caused the rampant spread of misinformation, which was fueled by a pre-existing guilt around grave theft and taking dead people and turning them into paint and eating them. I mean, it's just awful. And that's what I would say is the real evils going on here, not necessarily Egyptian curses.
Hey, Ivy, are you saying that white people are the curse?
Wait a second. No, but literally though. Oh man. But that's not wrong though. We're an actual plague to the earth.
Right?
Colonization. And so a lesson to be learned here, also, and to compare this to a modern phenomena that kept coming up into my head as I was writing this script, satanic panic. Because rumors of Egyptian curses like this, like the curse of King Tutankhamun's tomb, helped spread this idea that older non-Christian religions were evil, their magics were evil and deadly, they were doing deadly curses on things, don't mess with them. Actually, when I worked at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in Kansas City, Missouri, we not only had items from King Tut's tomb, it wasn't much, it was like some beads, I think, from some of the jewelry, but a lot of visitors were hesitant to enter the Egyptian galleries. And I personally witnessed so much of what I'm about to say because a lot of my job there most days was as a gallery officer. And I loved being stationed in the Egyptian section, or that whole wing of the museum. There was other sections, like we had ancient Roman and Greek art I would look after too, which was really cool. But this stigma, this fear of, oh, what if these tomb objects they all have evil curses and I'm going to die if I go near them? I would see this because people were scared to enter the gallery. They didn't want to look at some of the items. The Nelson even had its own mummy, which I have thoughts on. But visitors, especially kids, were really scared of the mummy. I would see people, even grown adults sometimes, like they would peep that mummy and they would rush by, like looking over their shoulder. They were frightened because that's what comes to mind for a lot of people when it comes to this. I did, oh gosh. So here's a fun story. I don't know if I've shared this on the podcast. I'm having deja vu thinking about it, so maybe I have, or maybe I told you this, Tasha. But allegedly, I wasn't there to personally see this, but I knew people who said that they witnessed it. During one occasion, a visitor in the Egyptian gallery was bad-mouthing Egyptian religions, calling it evil and wrong, and just saying very ignorant and hateful things. And as they were saying this and calling it like demonic and stuff like that, there was something hanging on the wall. It wasn't like an artifact or anything. It was some kind of sign or like a plastic holder for brochures. But it apparently, allegedly, just like flew off of the wall right at the feet of this person who just freaked out and left. Which is amazing if you ask me. Again, I wasn't there for it. I would have loved to not only chat with that visitor and be like, hey, literally, what are you talking about? Please stop. But I would have loved to see the fear in their eyes as they ran away. So not to play into like the negative tropes,
Right?
but I do think that it's possible that there was still some level of spiritual protections, and something in that gallery was like, will you please stop being ignorant and wrong, and like got this person to get out.
I feel like too, and it may have been on like maybe one of your other podcasts, but I feel like I remember you saying like that there were times that like, or that there were notes of hauntings at the
Yes.
museum. So I wouldn't be surprised even if it wasn't like something else in the museum being like, lady, stop and like shut up.
There was, I could have, wait, okay, future episode idea. I could have an entire episode that's just talking about the haunted happenings at the Nelson, because yeah, I firmly believe that building was haunted as heck. And one of the prevalent apparitions that I personally saw, this, so many people I know personally saw this man. It was one of the former curators of the museum. And so I think someone like him, I'm like, well, he surely would have been very protective. He didn't curate the items from that gallery per se, but yeah, that's absolutely, if you ask me, in the realm of possibilities. Like maybe it wasn't, the mummy. I do hope that the spirit of this mummy, the individual that is now the mummy, is still resting in peace in the afterlife, hopefully. But again, I could do a whole episode on my thoughts on items like that being in a museum in Missouri, but we'll save that for another day. But that is a little bit on King Tut and some of his history, the opening of his tomb, and a curse. That's all I got.
Yay! That was so fun, Ivy.
Hey, that's a little bit of a longer episode too. It's been a little while since we've had an episode like really diving into a topic, so I hope everyone enjoyed it. I hope we all learned a little something, and don't forget to find us on Instagram at Odd Anthropology. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube. We are also on Substack as well, and you can email us at oddanthropology@gmail.com and give us some feedback. Leave us a rating and review wherever you're listening. Be sure to subscribe so you're notified when a new episode comes out, which is usually one a month. So we'll see everyone in a month.
You can tell you're a pro at that.
I did pretty good this time. Usually like my brain is goo by the end, and I'm like, what are we? Where are we? What episode number is
Find
this?
us places.
Oh my god, yeah. I'm literally recording in a closet, but
Well, and I mean, so like I know some podcasts I listen to, they like do seasons,
Mhm.
and I'm like, okay, so like, are we one of those ones that just does like, they end up with like many episodes, or do we like break it down into seasons where like 1 year's a season, second year's a season, kind of a thing? I
I
mean, I
guess
don't
we could
really
have
care
done
either way.
that. I mean, there is audio coming out that you can listen to. That's, the
Right.
summary
Exactly.
of this. And I did see that we had gotten another 5-star review, I think, on Spotify.
Ooh.
So whoever left that, or 5-star rating, I should say, Spotify. I don't think Spotify does like word reviews, but you can leave comments if you're listening on Spotify. You can leave comments right underneath. I always forget about that. Sometimes I think about leaving comments from my Spotify account because they do follow us. I'm just going to start gassing us up. Best episode I've ever heard in my life, and I'm going to leave it under every single episode. Well, see you next month, everybody.
Listen to this episode or you'll be cursed. We'll see you next month.
Goodbye.